Do a lot of talking tonight because okay, GD Carja, Falshus Jack, Kshimar Tashiv. Listen, good to see you all, Karen and Fergus. We're waiting for Dahi. He's not here yet, but he's due to join us. And it's a day before Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's, Karen.
Happy Valentine's Day, and to Fergus and to Carl.
Fergus, yes. And, we're a day early, but what's a day between friends, eh?
That's it. You said it.
Okay, we'll finish then now, right? No, we want to talk about just the whole thing about the amnesty that's been given by Helen McEntee of Fine Gael to at least 17, maybe 20,000 plus undocumented migrants. That's the word that they're using. Welcome, Dahi. We're just starting.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We're talking about. We're going to start off talking about that, the issue about the undocumented migrants. You might have some facts and figures there. You're our facts and figures guy.
I have some.
And I will finish off just talking about the thing about I didn't want to jump in the bandwagon at the time, but the Ashley Murphy thing and the reaction of the double standard with the woke liberal agenda. On the one hand, bashing men, and then the minute it turns out it was an immigrant, no debate on that subject. And the fact that in Ireland, it seems amazing that there is not one commentator mentions the immigration as a debate point. You know, that's just, at least you get a debate like that in England. Okay, but look, or GB, the undocumented migrant thing, what are the facts? Is it at least 17 to 20,000 unvetted? Dahi, you're shaking your head. Is it more than that or
no,
what?
Actually, the numbers that they've said about 17,000 might apply. That rings true to me. I was reading stuff from different migrant groups, and they're saying there might be about 25,000 in the country, but about a third of those might be children.
Right.
So there's some strangeness. Nobody really knows how many are in the country, but that sort of rings true. Right. Remember, some people are going to be applying as individuals, and some are going to be applying as families. You know, we really don't know how many are going to apply now.
I wanted to ask the question, we've talked about this before, and you've talked about the high level of qualification that immigrants that coming to Ireland do seem to have. Do you know off the top of your head what are the levels of, because obviously not all criminals, the vast majority of immigrants are not criminal, the vast majority of local people are not criminal. Is there a balance, or is there more of a tipping point to one side or the other, or what? Because we don't want to be teaching immigrants here, you know.
Yeah, because people are, if they're illegal, we really won't know what kind of backgrounds they have so much yet, right? So we'll find that out possibly later, but we don't really know. I mean, the figure I've usually used, and I got it, I think, from, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's about 67% of people coming into the country to work have a third level education, right? So my line is, we're not taking in the world's poor, huddled masses or anything. They're coming in because they've got pretty good qualifications to work. Yeah. So that's the thing. But we don't really know with undocumented people. You know, you'd assume that the levels aren't that high, or they could have applied the normal way. Right.
What about the point? Yeah. Sorry, Fergus, go on ahead.
No, I was going to say it's a good point that, and I suppose when you talk about the undocumented, by definition, they're kind of under the radar. I mean, they would presumably come here on holiday for a fortnight and then just set up shop. But one of the things that kind of interests me is these people are all able to access employment and housing, and yet they are not in the country lawfully. It's just something that bothers me. And I've worked in companies where we've had to be we've brought in staff from Indonesia in particular who had particular high skills that we couldn't genuinely get in Ireland. So those people, we actively went to those places and attracted people and brought them in, and they all were lawful. I mean, I personally processed the GNIB applications, and so I'm well aware of, the lawful way to bring people into Ireland. There's a system, the system works, and yet for some of them, and these are people who presumably are not in skill sets that are in demand, they feel it necessary to come here decide to overstay is another way of phrasing it. I've known people who've gone to Australia and overstayed. I mean, it's not just an issue about overstayers coming to Ireland. I mean, Irish people.
America, it's
we've gone there for generations. We've gone there. But let me just jump the gun a little bit. if they're there illegally, they should be deported out of there. It doesn't matter whether they're Irish or Chinese or what they are. But anyway, I'll
What about those that have gone over illegally initially and are now legal for whatever reason? They've now got their status.
Well, I'll give you an example. I have a personal friend.
You only know ones like that.
I've a friend who in the US who recently married, and her husband, who was also Irish, was illegal. And I mean, me being a cynic, I assumed he was marrying her because he wanted she was there lawfully from the start. As my sister, I have family in the US. They went lawfully and at great expense. Some of those people have no time for people who go unlawfully. But having said it, in that one case, this friend of mine married a guy, and by virtue of that fact, he got his status. But it's a bona fide wedding. I mean, it's not a sham.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an issue here for a long number of years about, I think, Eastern European ladies in particular were marrying guys from Africa. And it was the biggest hoax going. And I mean, the Gardaí knew all about it. So I don't know where that ever went. I've never really delved too deeply into that stuff. It's a little bit tawdry.
There's a thing in the news today I saw about with the hospitality industry is crying out for more labour, and it's looking like there's going to be a massive need for immigrant labour, a bit like when the Celtic Tiger was on. I mean, Karen, you work in a hospital, you're talking about a shortage. Do you hold with the view that we're going to need big numbers of immigrant labour for the hospitality, Karen?
Well, definitely, because I mean we've a high level of Filipino nurses in the hospitals for years, and what I'm seeing is an awful lot of admin people going. So I don't know where that's going to be. We have a good mix of, say, Eastern European people coming in doing admin work, which is great, but we can't seem to hold on to our admin staff at the moment. There's a big turnover. But I mean, the amount of, we get, as Fergus was saying, the people are coming in with good quality qualifications, and if we didn't have the nurses from Philippines, we wouldn't have any nurses. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do the job wouldn't be done, and the hospitals wouldn't run because we wouldn't be able to we can't get enough Irish nurses. As we all know, the Irish nurses get trained here and they go off to England, they go to Canada, go to Australia, and we can't hold on to them. But then the Filipino nurses are coming over here, and then the Filipino hospitals are missing out on their nurses, what they train. So it's kind of like it's all moving around. It's not staying in their own country to help their own country. I mean, Ireland.
It is a help, Karen, isn't it, to have some immigrant labour? Yeah.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
It is a help to have some immigrant labour in the hospital.
Absolutely. I mean, they're great. They do a great job, and they mix in and they settle into this country very well, no problem.
So we've no issue with that. We've no issue with that at all.
Yeah,
I'd like to get in there if I could a bit, just to make a couple of things clear. For the asylum seekers, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, for the asylum seekers, it's only going to be for people that have been living here illegally for 4 years if they're solo, 3 years if it's family, and 2 years if they're asylum seekers. So what they're kind of doing is they're going to be clearing the books of the last few years of asylum seekers that failed but didn't get deported. That's basically what this is. Right. So there are other people that have been living here longer, but if they've been here for 10 years, this isn't really for them. It's for 4 years.
If they've been here for 10 years, are they just that's it? They're here.
They should have probably already got it sorted out by now. But that's it. The thing about nurses, though, I mean, it's something we can debate. But the thing about nurses is, yes, most of our nurses go. But if we didn't have the option of hiring nurses for less money, the Irish government would have to pay nurses the appropriate amount, and starting fees in Australia.
Same as hospitality.
Yeah, but the starting nursing pay in like Australia is $5,000 more a year. So who's not going to go? So, and since now we've discovered that our government basically grows money on trees, all of these decisions are just kind of arbitrary. If they can pay for anything they want to, if they want to enough. This was a decision that was made after the last economic collapse. And so they decided, well, this is where we're going to spend our money. This is where we're not going to. So I'm not quite so sympathetic to the idea of like, well, we need them. We need them because we need them. If they made other decisions, we wouldn't need them at all. So that's my 2 cents on that.
You see the issue around, we'll have to talk about the voluntary deportation orders. And if it's a deportation order
I think it was Grips that did an FOI request looking for the origins of the number, which was 17,000, which was first mooted.
Yeah.
And the Department of Justice failed to respond. And I think it went to the Ombudsman or whoever it is that assesses these FOI requests. And the department still wasn't able to come up with where the number came from. Because, I mean, if you go back about 5 years, the MRCI had a number of, I think it was around the mid-20s in terms of the thousands of people that were here illegally. And that seems to have dropped now to 17. Mysteriously or otherwise. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying we made a mistake. We thought the number was one thing, but to just not come up with any old number or to explain the number you have is definitely shifty. I don't care what anybody says. This is shifty, and Dahi's dead right. This is about clearing the books because they abjectly failed to tackle this issue for years. They failed.
They're just basically saying, "Look, we're just going to give everybody a."
Yeah, give them all a blank slate, and then in 10 years' time, they'll come back and give the next bunch who failed to comply the next blank slate. That's where this is going.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
It's a bit like, it reminds me of the Channel thing with the Dover boats coming over every day. I kind of feel that Boris Johnson then doesn't want to get that sorted at all. He's more interested in the Ukrainian border rather than worrying about his own border. But I just think that they don't care. They're quite happy to see this levels of globalization happening. Karen, what do you think?
Yes, I've been listening to the news about that over the last week. They were talking about, the amount of people are coming over still, and regardless, and that that border control has really failed, and regarding from a Brexit point of view. So if we got an Irish exit out of the EU, I don't want to see that happening, because we need to control our borders in relation to, let people in with a good qualification, like nurses, doctors, lawyers, construction workers, kind of thing, that have a skill to contribute to the society that they're coming into, whether it's England or Ireland. But we need to say no as well, and then make sure that we have control and say over who comes in. But we're not seeing that in England, and it's a complete failure. And what Priti Patel is doing, she's saying, but she's not doing, and then that's what was coming across over the last week. So we don't want to see that happening here in Ireland. Regarding deportation issue, I do agree that should never be voluntary. So if somebody has deported for whatever reason, they've committed a crime or whatever, or they've overstayed their welcome, they should be put back on the plane by the authorities and be sent home. Now, I did look at this scheme earlier on, and it's people who are deported, who have never bothered getting on that plane, can apply for this scheme. Now, I don't know if they've committed a crime. Where do we stand? Are they going to allow? They even say people who have committed a minor crime can do it as
minor
well.
crimes can stay, I think. Yeah. Minor crimes,
So what's minor? To me, how far do you go with that?
Yeah, exactly. It's very vague. It's very vague. Yeah.
Very vague. Who determines it?
Dahi, what's minor? Have you heard?
They haven't specified. They've deliberately left it that way. They're not going to tell you.
Oh yeah, no, I've noticed that. Is that just
you think there was no housing problem? Never mind the 2040 plan that's coming around the corner. You'd think there wasn't a housing issue, and there's never a debate mentioned on it. And now you've got at least 20,000 coming in. Nobody joins up the dots with that.
No.
You did mention it.
For the sake of clarity, I think I slightly misspoke. It's for anybody that's 4 years and more in the country, not 4 years or less. It's 4 years or more, but 3 years if you've got a family. So they're trying to make it as embracing as possible. So yeah, they're trying to clear out the blessings. But as far as deportation, if it's an asylum seeker you're talking about, if they have a present deportation order, they're not eligible.
Right.
So they have to have cleared and granted some sort of leave to stay or leave to remain in the country. They can't be under a deportation order.
And apply for this scheme.
Yeah,
right. But Go on
I
ahead,
think
Paul.
this scheme as well runs for 6 months. So it opened whatever it was on the 1st of February, and that then whatever that is, the end of August or July or whatever, will be a closing date. And I'm going to be very interested to hear who it is who's actually availed of this. I'm sure FOI data will be available to elaborate on the nature, who it is that's now availed of it, where they're from, and presumably whether there's been criminality associated with them. Because I don't think we need to be. There's plenty of people who can genuinely seek to come here, and there are people that we would like to see come here, perhaps. But there's an element that we certainly don't want, including there was a particular character about a fortnight ago who was just released from jail, I think it was, or court, and he walked out the door and urinated all over the front of the court.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that guy, he's a guy who was supposed to self-deport. How he's still here is an absolute disgrace. It's a scandal, and it's a reflection on Helen McEntee personally. This is on her.
I mean, you could be kind to her and say she's just trying to do the right thing with all this, but she talks very high and mighty about protecting crime against women and girls, which is a new phrase. There's a word for that. It's called females. This women and girls thing. I don't know why they started, but anyway, surely in the first issue you could stop illegal immigrants. That impacts on crime against everybody, doesn't it?
True. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Carl, you mentioned earlier on the numbers that the hospitality industry is looking to bring in. I mean, it's very unfortunate that I suppose the way I'd look at it is we're in the EU, for better or worse, and there is something like 24 or 5% youth unemployment in places like Greece. So if we need to bring in people from overseas because our own unemployed don't want to do those jobs, well, why isn't it that we're bringing people who those Greeks are perfectly lawfully entitled to come here? Why is it necessary to go to Brazil or India or Pakistan or Nigeria to bring in people who'll take those jobs? I mean, to me, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, EU unemployment figures are absolutely shocking, particularly for younger people, and they can lawfully come in here and set up shop, and there's nobody can bat an eyelid, and nor would I, because at the moment, because we're in the EU, so that's the way it is. So why do we seem to be looking to South America, including in the I've major experience in the home care sector, and it seems that all new staff that are coming into the country as home care assistants are Brazilian, Uruguayan, Nigerian. There seems to be not one person from within the 440 million populated EU that seems to want to work in that sector. So we do have structural issues here we need to tackle, as in why our unemployed are not prepared to work in certain industries. And we all know why, because they get paid too much on the dole. But hey, I'll get blamed for that, but it's
there
true.
needs to be a debate on that too. But I just think it's a bit rich when you talk about opening up the doors like that, and then you got a major so-called problem about crime, But let's go on to talk about the issue about the epidemic of crime against females. I mean, Ireland is at the lowest end of the league table in the world's rankings on this. It's beside Liechtenstein. So there is no epidemic of violence against females. So 90% plus is against males. That doesn't get a mention. Karen, Jonah, what was your take on the whole thing about the tragedy of young Aisling Murphy and the media reaction to it?
The media reaction, oh my God, I have to say now, I was shocked and very, very skeptical and cynical about it because, okay, I'm not saying what happened to her was, it was a tragedy to a young woman. She fought against him. What bothered me was that they were too busy. I looked at the footage outside the courts, and to me, usually when somebody gets arrested for any kind of crime, they usually have a certain amount of anonymity, and then until they're proved innocent or guilty, they have to remain innocent in the court case. And because when the jury's been selected, that he hasn't got a chance of real justice, and that goes for any man or any woman who's up against any kind of crime. And to me, it was almost kind of like staged and deliberately exposed. the overplay. I mean, even here in Drogheda, they had a big kind of like a memorial kind of thing in the Drogheda area and around the country. But I've never seen that happen with any other woman being killed. I mean, plenty of women have gone missing in this country in the last 20 to 30 years. Jojo Dollar, Fiona Sinnott, but nobody ever had a memorial for them like the way they did for this young lady. It's almost as if as soon as it happens, we're all very quick to go and have a memorial for them. I don't know where that's happening, why that's happening all of a sudden. And to me, that we should be allowed to kind of, oh yes, we should say, you know, it is terrible, but we should be allowed justice to happen. But the result of the men being any man being kind of like being how to say ostracized, they seem to jump on the bandwagon about that too. Why an anti-male kind of sentiment?
Well, it was anti-male generally. It was very anti-male.
Yes.
You know, basically it was Irish male they were kicking the boot into up until the fact that it came out that it was an immigrant, and then there was no discussion about his immigrant status, about whether that could have been a factor in it or whether that needs to be addressed. Anybody else comment on that?
Wasn't there a guy as well a couple of years ago just going to work on New Year's Day or St. Stephen's Day, a Japanese man who was murdered by somebody?
Yeah.
And of course, that guy had mental issues, so the whole thing was a non-debate after that. Like, it was literally dropped like a hot potato. I mean, I don't think that man ever got justice. I never heard if there was a day in court for the alleged perpetrator, but I just wish we were more happy to discuss these things. It doesn't need to be bad. Like, the more we know about these things, the more we can make informed decisions.
Yeah. I mean, Janet Varsey, very anti-Irish male bias out there. I agree, totally. Dahi, what's your point on that?
Sorry, I'm having it very difficult to hear anybody. Are you breaking up, or is it just me?
Just you.
Is everything else fine? Is there?
Everything's okay, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I got bits and pieces of this, so if you can hear me, I'll give my 2 cents again. I did hear you speaking about youth employment a bit, but when you were talking earlier about that they wanted to import about 60,000 people more in the hospitality sector, they want to bring in about 60,000 people. Thing is, like, these are people looking for work permits, so they're not EU people. They're looking for 60,000 people outside the EU. So it's not just that. And when people are talking about it being youth, but a lot, like, if it's about 49% of the people in hospitality work in hotels, 49% work in pubs, and the average age is 26 plus for a lot of this, average now when it comes to it. So, like, we're not necessarily robbing the very young people of jobs, like high school jobs or getting through university. It's even post that now. So, like, again, we have to think about who are these people that they need and why. And since I've got the floor and I can't hear you otherwise, I'm going to say this other bit. I don't care how many people the economy can support. I mean, it's possible the economy can support 1 million people or 2 million more people. But just because particular business people find it in their interest to hire more employees so they can make more profit, I'm not for it, because I think it changes demographics of the country. And just because someone can make some money on it doesn't mean we should let them away with it. We should have bigger concerns than just the profits of particular individuals.
Fair point.
And I won't be able to hear any comebacks on this.
Presumably they'll be paying them less than what they'd be paying Irish people, I would suggest.
That'd be a worry, all right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember what happened to that guy in Dundalk. I mean, I remember that they were cobbling together some sort of mental health defense pattern. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there'll be something like that for the guy in Offaly. I mean, also he was on disability, 5-bedroom detached house.
How is it? Oh my goodness. I mean, that's what Fergus was saying earlier on about the issue about people coming over and that they can get the housing. And that is an issue. If you are on illegal, you shouldn't have access to that kind of access to housing. You know, if you're illegal, and you're working, contributing to the country, like getting a job, skill.
No English language. He doesn't speak Irish. What is he offering and bringing to the table? But that's the EU for you. It's free movement, isn't it? Yeah.
It's free movement, but it's also interesting that they seem to be perfectly willing to go beyond the EU to look for these people. I mean, everybody's entitled to look for work, and hopefully everybody finds something that works for them. But we can't just import the entire world into the EU, and specifically into Ireland. I don't care what Germany does, but the problem is if they get into Germany, they're every bit as entitled to come here, presumably. Yeah. And we can't sustain this without impacting ourselves negatively. But can I jump sideways onto an issue as well that just in the health service, there was a mention earlier on about the number of nurses that we seem to educate nurses for export. One of the problems is, and this is something that I don't know whether it gets airtime, there's an awful lot of young people, when they finish their couple of years in college, the first thing they want to do is go leave and travel around the world. It's not a reflection on where they come from, and then maybe they all hope to come back at some point, but it's just a rite of passage for many people. I know people who emigrated after college, and they're now back here. They went for a few years or whatever. Maybe it was 10 years, and they've all come back. Well, sorry, many of them have come back. So I wouldn't see it as being, I suppose if you want to hold certain key skills like nurses, possibly you might want to make them a good look getting this to work. You probably might want to commit them to working in the health sector for a couple of years before they do that rite of passage. I don't know how you could ever stop them from going, but
just seems to be not well thought out. I think I mean, people before profit, or as I say, FBI, foreigners before Irish. Or people before puberty, they were unhappy that there weren't more coming in. I mean, has there ever been any consultation exercise or survey exercise to gauge people's public opinion on that issue in the South? I know in the North we do have consultation exercises and people do get their chance to put their opinion, but has there ever been any never even mind a referendum, any consultation on this issue? Anybody ever get asked your opinion on it? No, Karen?
No, not. I know before all this started, the government was putting these people's forums together in hotel. They used to kind of like to solve a problem. That was before COVID, and they'd meet up every weekend for several weeks. I can't remember what it was called, People's Forum or something, and it'd be something to do with housing or something to do with some problem in society. And they debate it and come up with a solution. But I don't know if it was a race of any kind of the immigration problem was one of those things. That's the nearest we'd come to it. But that was only a recent kind of platform. That's the nearest we came to doing anything like that. But I don't know if actual immigration was part of that discussion.
They now have, is it the Citizens Assembly or Citizens Forum or something? Those, I mean, I'll be a cynic again and say that the topics that those groups talk about are the topics that the state, the government wants them to talk about.
Yes, I agree.
And they actually, I mean, there was one on abortion before that all went the way the state required it to go. It doesn't matter. There's two more coming up later this year, I believe. And I think they pick, like, say, for argument's sake, 100 people, and they present them with informed experts to talk on the subject. But even on the issue of abortion, and I think I'm right in this, they restricted to an incredible degree the number of people who were able to present that were on the anti-abortion side of that argument. I could stand to be corrected on that. That's my recollection of that particular issue. But to me, those groups are always intended to give the government smokescreen, because they can always say, well, the Citizens Assembly required us to tackle it this way. And yet they probably picked the 100 people that were on that group. So they prejudged where it goes. And to me, it's the greatest hoax. And why it gets any airtime from any serious journalist is beyond me. But thankfully, we now have a to give a plug to Gript, I have no connection with them whatsoever. But those guys seem to be perfectly willing to get down and dirty with going after the powers that be to challenge them on certain of these issues, which is great.
Thanks, Fergus. Yeah. Mick Golden has said that the one time there was a say on immigration was the birthright referendum, which was defeated by 70%. But they seem to be trying to overturn that. So it just seems to be every time there is some sort of consultation, they don't get the answer they want, so they just either ignore it or force you to vote again, you know.
That's our history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another point there. Ireland had never had a family. The Irish didn't die. So they died in workhouses run by a Catholic Church. Yeah.
Can I just come back on Paul's point there? I'm a bit of a genealogist, and I have ancestors that ended up in the workhouse. And it wasn't so much it wasn't anything to do with the church. Well, sorry, in their case, it wasn't. One of the only places that poor people could ever get medical attention was by voluntarily entering the workhouse, because the medical personnel would actually attend the workhouse. So if you weren't well, you went in there to pursue access to medical services. So it wasn't all about the big bad church. Just for Paul's
Right.
entertainment or whatever.
See Paul back, by the way. I hadn't seen you for a while over our last couple of streams, but Fulsha Arash Akara. Good point there made by Brian Baru. Eamon McCann is our people before profit. Everybody should know Eamon in Derry, but he says he gets ran out of the water side when he goes canvassing there. I'm sure he does, yeah. They wouldn't be too keen on that up there. And that part of Derry, it's the other side to the city side, you know, it's the more unionist.
I have to say, you're nobody unless you've been bricked out of a housing estate by locals who don't want you there. And I have that distinction as well. But anyway.
Well, that's a very good. We could talk all night on that topic. I mean, I just have another note here about I mentioned the violence against women and girls. To me, that reminds me of Black Lives Matter. You know, it's identity politics. Instead of saying all violence we're against, and instead of saying all lives matter, we seem to be picking on one sort of section over the other. You know, which I think that's problematic. Karen, any final comments?
What you're talking about, like, the anti-man sentiment, just kind of came to me there. I don't know if it was a TD or a senator mentioned a license for men to enter the social arena in order to keep women safe. Like, so for instance, if you want to go to a pub, you have to have a license to go in, and so people will know that you are okay to deal with on a social level. That's where it was going. Now, I don't think it got any traction. People weren't going to go with that because, I mean, you saw through the anti-man, argument. I was disturbed by it. I mean, I'm just disturbed by the amount of attention she was getting. And nothing to do with the girl who's died. But why are we honing in on that particular death over other people's deaths?
Yeah. I mean, there was a wee lad in England. A 15-year-old was murdered at the same time, and it got mentioned once, but there was no frenzy or hysteria about it.
Exactly.
You know, and then you had your late show and your Claire Byrne show, and it was going on and on. It was becoming a bit nauseating. It wasn't tragic; it was heartbreaking. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, there were other murders and violent attempts. I mean, John has said that there. There was another good comment that somebody made about the Irish rugby team. I think that he's gone there. They need some diversity. They're not doing the taking the knee in the rugby. Somebody made a comment that the Irish rugby team wasn't diverse enough. So I'll leave that one with you. Yes.
But I think on the rugby,
Paul made that comment.
On the rugby side, there's no obligation on the Irish team to field an all-Irish squad. I mean, I think a number of them are not Irish. They're New Zealanders who probably can't get a game with the All Blacks.
I think there was one guy who came in. Was that? Yeah.
But I'm not a rugby guy, so good luck.
That's true. I mean, you saw the thing. I'll just finish up the comment that was made. I think it was Lynn Boylan in the Dáil the other week saying about people were offended about the rosary being said near the abortion. Anybody see that?
I heard about that.
I mean, this is just nutcase stuff. They were going over saying, yes, you can have your opinion, but you have to take on board the opinion of women are offended by this.
I don't know.
They're criminalising anybody who has a different opinion to you.
I think they took exception to the fact that these guys were saying the rosary, you know, and it wasn't part of the approved meeting about paying their respects. Those men were, I think there were 8 or 9 of them. I just saw a little video clip. They were there to pay their respects to somebody who was murdered. I mean, like, how dare anybody take exception to that? Whose grief is more relevant? I mean, everybody, as a society, we should be repulsed by what happened to that woman. It doesn't matter who done it. And certainly the fact of them being a non-Irish is, it came to light afterwards.
It shouldn't. It wasn't. It's not racist to mention that. In the same way, it's not if it's not sexist to talk about the fact that it was men, as Jeanette says there, they prefer to blame white Irish men. Well, then it's not racist to talk about the fact that he was from Slovakia or wherever it was.
Yeah.
Jeanette saying feminism is cancer. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you there, Jeanette.
Yeah, definitely.
The radical form that we have now, you know, of the hate speech is coming in,
Yeah, that's great, and that way, when we're on these live streams, we better be real careful what we say, otherwise we get a knock on the door.
But we already have the proper legislation for that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same way the abortion thing. The abortion legislation already dealt with the hard cases. Now you've got it on demand. It's the most liberal abortion laws in Europe. I mean, Janet made a point there. Eamon Ryan wants 5 million more people on the island. That's the Green Party guy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a lunatic.
Sorry?
The man's a lunatic. He's an absolute maniac.
The carbon footprint and the housing and health, you know, you couldn't make that sort of thing up.
No.
You know? That's very good.
Who was it who said that Greens should be eaten and not heard?
Yeah. Well, Jeffrey Donaldson said that he's had enough of unionists being seen and not heard as regards the protocol, which has no legal authority up here. It has no legal authority by the assembly or by the people, and it's a radical departure from the Good Friday Agreement. So I think it's time that it was re-looked at.
Yeah.
That's something for another day. Jeanette is in is Waterford, isn't she? Yeah.
Dublin.
Oh, Dublin. Right.
Yeah, she mentioned there that Eamon Ryan is her TD, but she didn't vote for him.
Is she in the IFP?
Do I say that? Yes. Yeah.
I think
yes.
I think we have met on stream or on video, but we'll have to have you on sometime, Jeanette, if you want, or anybody else that would like to just send a message and we'll have anybody on. But look, Gurmila Mayagav, thank you very much. It's a very interesting debate tonight. So we've been on for 40 minutes. Good crowd of interaction. Thank you guys as well, Karen and Fergus on Dahi.
No problem. Have a good night.
We'll see you all soon. August. If anybody else has anything else they want to chip in before we go, if not, we'll just say Slán.
Slán. EOI.
EOI.
Good night, everybody.
Slán.
Good night.
Bye-bye.